Morning all.
Morning.
It's a bit of a smorgasbord of different things this morning with the focus on First Nations people and us and sermon and everything, but hopefully God will draw it all together in a thread. And I was thinking actually, many of you will know that I've been involved with SIM in their anti-trafficking ministry and tracking what's been happening in Australia actually. And the New South Wales Commissioner often talks a lot about the history of slavery in our country here. And it's everywhere. And I sadly can tell you that it's not going away in a hurry. And over the last 5 years has increased from 40 to 50 million people in the world in slavery. And it's the fastest growing criminal activity. It creates a huge profit for those involved. So it's becoming the context for missionaries where they're working with vulnerable people, which is many communities. So we have 4,000 workers, and the role of SIM's for Freedom Ministry is to equip those workers to recognise it and to put in place protection mechanisms for protecting them from the vulnerability of being trafficked and exploited. So that's what I've been doing, meanwhile.
So since coming back from Malawi, you can probably remember that my role is split in two, and I support SIM Australia, and the SIM Australia director is there on the right with his wife. And I also continue to support the work in Southern Africa, and the regional director for Southern Africa is there at the bottom in the middle, and his wife. And a lot of what I do is administrative support in the background to help ensure that things like people like those who are involved in the For Freedom ministry or involved in any ministry, whether it be linked with people being trafficked or compassionate ministries or Bible college teaching or church planting, can happen on the ground and that they don't have to worry about those administrative things. So my time is really spent supporting these two directors and the other directors in the Southern Africa region. And that's a great privilege, just to be there supporting them so that they can do their thing without having to worry, hopefully, about too many of the background things.
So in terms of just giving you a quick snapshot as to what's been happening in the For Freedom side of things, basically we continue to work top down and bottom up. So working alongside individual workers in the field, and I'll give you a couple of examples, but also working top down so that SIM becomes a strong organisation. We've just introduced the Vulnerable People Policy trying to get more of the individual ministries to work together. So those who head up the health ministry, the trauma healing ministry, the sports friends ministry, to really be talking to each other and sharing information and becoming more effective in what we do as an organisation. In terms of, I just thought I would share a few little stories of how I'm seeing God at work, and it's just exciting to be part of it. So I see God at work raising up new people, which is exciting. As I get kind of towards the end of my working life, it's exciting to see young people. And I've been mentoring a young woman called Kira from South Australia. She's about to head to Central Europe to work amongst those in the sex workers. She's a counsellor. So just to take the hope of the gospel and to try and encourage them down a path towards freedom. So she will have many challenges ahead of her, but it's great to see God calling people into some of those specific ministries. One of the things that I get involved in is trying to find good resources and write extra resources. And particularly over the last year, it's been so exciting. Some of you may remember I talked about the Today for Tomorrow program that we used in Malawi. And it was really a children's outreach and discipleship and HIV prevention program. And now they've added in our Keeping Kids Safe trafficking lessons as well. So, and this is what we want to do. Every ministry, we're not about starting new ministries, but bringing in this awareness and prevention. And so now They've been working across Southern Africa. They've been doing many trainings with children's ministry workers in South Africa, Botswana, Madagascar. In Madagascar alone, they trained about 200 teachers and ministry workers who are already reaching 1,800 kids in schools and communities, giving them those skills to recognise the traffickers' tricks and stay safe. And it's just exciting to see simple resources that we can make feeding in and making a big difference. I love supporting specific ministries. It takes quite a bit of time building relationships with a missionary, but the For the One ministry was actually one I had the privilege of actually meeting up with the leaders when I travelled there at the end of last year. They're reaching out with the gospel to a very poor, vulnerable community, a township on the outskirts of Cape Town, where there's incredible high levels of domestic violence and abuse in general. They had already been introducing trauma healing training for those in those communities. And just after I visited them and we were talking about all the other vulnerabilities in the community, I got an email that said, "We've just been talking to women, they're selling their children. We've just heard of 3 kids who've been sold." And so that spurred them on again to kind of do some more awareness training and introduce these keeping kids safe lessons. So it takes time, and gradually, just seeing ministries responding has been really exciting to see God at work there. And as well as that, we've been able to last year set up a new project called Equipping for Trafficking Prevention. So we've now got some funds to help support some new initiatives to get off the ground. And one of the most exciting to me is a country in South Asia where Christians are definitely the minority. It's not an easy place to be as a Christian. But there's a Christian hospital in this place, and they have a community health outreach program. And they've now added a component, and we're helping to train volunteers there to tackle sensitive issues around forced marriage and child marriage. So again, I don't know if I've mentioned before that, you know, when you think about trafficking, it's not just for sexual exploitation. Of that 50 million, 27 million are in forced labour and 22 million are in forced marriages. It's a huge, huge issue. So it's exciting for us to be able to start a new project with this organisation in South Asia to be tackling those issues. And final one, I could go on for a long time, but just seeing God at work, how our little group, we've got 4,000 missionaries in SIM, and there's 4 of us plus a lady who provides some administrative support. So it's a bit of a Herculean task. But what God's giving us actually is a voice into international advocacy. So we try and become members of international networks. So the World Freedom Network are Christian organisations who are trying to speak into the anti-trafficking space. And then they have the European Freedom Network. We work with them with the Ukrainian refugee crisis. They've just asked our For Freedom lead to set up the Oceania Freedom Network, and she's been invited to go and speak and make representations at the United Nations. So these bodies are making a real difference. The G20 Social Summit in Rio last November made a historic agreement. They put in their recommendations. They are going to work to eradicate human trafficking. It's the first time. And that's largely because of the Christian advocacy. So amazing what God's doing. So thank you for your support for both of us, and thank you for your support for Freedom. Sorry, that's a bit long.
So behind the scenes, I've been busy working with the director in Australia and the directors in the Southern Africa region. One of the things we have been asking people to pray for is leadership changes, and particularly with the new regional director, coming in the photo there is the South Africa director washing the feet of the new regional director at the regional conference, and that was just a really beautiful moment to see that spirit of servanthood within the directors within the region. And also a couple of other directors for Zambia and Zimbabwe who've recently started, and I've been involved in their orientation. But there are more director transitions in the pipeline for Malawi and Mozambique and Madagascar. So it's an ongoing turnover of directors, because it's, being a director is not the easiest of roles. It really is 24/7 almost, just like being a minister here in a church. You're sort of always on call. Within Australia, we've done a lot of work to streamline governance and the operations of the board, and to really get the board more involved in understanding the work of SIM, rationalising key documents and charters and policies. It doesn't sound all that exciting, but those things that have to happen in the background to make things function well on the ground. And SIM's introduced a number of new systems globally, finance, HR, ministry systems, risk management, a new intranet. A lot of things have all happened in the last year, and I've been supporting the directors in Southern Africa, starting to implement those systems. And one of the key roles has been to oversee the operations of the Southern Africa Regional Council, which is all the directors within the region, which includes organising the Leaders Conference that we were at in October, which provides a great opportunity to bring those leaders together to discuss common issues, common ministries, look at how we can take these ministries forward, what can we learn from one another. It's much easier in person than on Zoom, even though we all know that Zoom is a necessary part of our world these days, but it's great to get people together in person. And it's also included revamping our finance support within the Southern Africa region, which now is going to be done through the South Africa office to support the rest of the region with their finances. And then God's at work in lots of different ways on the ground. And, it's not quite 6 degrees of separation, but, the things that we do in the background support these things on the ground, like mobilising new entities or countries to send missionaries. Those countries that have long received missionaries, we're really encouraging them to think, you can send missionaries as well back into the West perhaps, or into other places around about, or particularly into areas where Western missionaries can't go, or even in their own countries, because their cultural understanding is so much better than ours. So those sorts of things, which is exciting. New partnerships with different churches. SIM and its affiliated missions over the last 100 years or so have planted many churches in many different countries and have traditionally worked with those churches. But now there's just more and more opportunities opening up for partnership with other churches. We don't need to plant a new church where there's already churches. It's much better if we can partner with people who are already doing things and strengthen what they're doing by what we can bring. Things like working with rural communities to improve their farming methods. Foundations for Farming is a ministry that, it's a discipleship ministry as well as an agricultural ministry, much like Hope for AIDS was a discipleship ministry, as well as speaking directly into the context of HIV and AIDS. Foundations for Farming comes in alongside subsistence farmers to help improve their management of their small crops and farms and to produce higher yields, which helps with food security when there's droughts and floods, which always come, especially in Southern Africa. It's very vulnerable to climate changes and the erratic nature of the climate there. And one of the things that's really exciting is the growth in Muslim background believer communities across the region, but particularly in the Malawi, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia sort of area, because that's where Islam is continuing to come down from North Africa and infiltrate into Southern Africa. And so it's great to see a much greater openness to the gospel in these Muslim communities than there was 20, 30 years ago when the ministry started. And we're seeing many people come and be publicly baptised, which is a huge thing for someone from a Muslim community. So there's just, again, a bit of a snapshot of some of the things that are happening around Australia and Southern Africa.
So I'm going to whistle through this really fast because I know we haven't got so much time. But we are just so appreciative of the long-term support and partnership from North Rocks. It's such a blessing, I can't tell you. And, there are...
Well, we can tell you.
But there are many ways, even though we're back in the country, we love people to receive our newsletter, ask us about it, keep learning, keep exploring. And then in terms of the slavery I mentioned, it still happens in Australia. So exploring, what could even be our role beyond the fair trade markets. Maybe there are other things that we can do to support vulnerable people in our country. Prayer is a huge thing. We have some prayer resources on our little table. We host a monthly Friday morning missionary prayer thing at our house. There are many ways and different ways that you can support us in prayer. We'd love that. I think you've all got our cards, but if you haven't, our little support cards, please feel free to drop by and pick one up if you'd like one. Support us, support a project. And it's never too late if God puts something on your heart to go, whether it's actually somewhere in Australia or beyond. Short term, long term, there are always roles. So come and talk to us if God's challenging you.
And just finally, a few prayer points that we'll put up, and I think they're pretty self-explanatory for wise and godly leaders, and particularly for the new ones that are needed in Southern Africa. This transition of the finance system throughout SIM globally, quite a number of teething issues, and if you've ever been involved in changing systems within an organisation, in a large organisation or a medium-sized organisation, it's not always easy. Pray for the new opportunities that the For Freedom team have in Southern Africa, and particularly to join in with SAM's strategic African discipleship movement. I can never get the right way around, the other way around, Africa. To again come alongside those. The discipleship movement is particularly working with pastors throughout the Southern Africa region and into other parts of Africa as well, and to come alongside those pastors so that they're aware of issues relating to human trafficking, and again just to raise up more people to go. So thanks very much for listening to all of that.